After many years and thousands of dollars in talk therapy and counselling, I realised we all want the same thing in life. To be loved and accepted for who we are, doing the things we love with the people we love the most. Now, before I share how I came to realise this was the pathway to freedom, I need to get a little bit technical for a few minutes if you just bear with me. What I've just described will look for each of us slightly different, but what looks most similar for the majority of the world, to be honest, is that we don't feel loved and accepted, not unconditionally at least. Consciously or unconsciously, our inner child feels rejected and disconnected. And the reason why we feel this way is because we reject and disconnect from ourselves. And the reason we reject and disconnect from ourselves is because the last and probably only time we've been in a state of oneness, pure unconditional love, pure bliss, was when we're actually born into this world. Because at this point, our senses awaken and we begin to receive feedback from the external world via sight, sound, smell, taste and touch, which simultaneously questions our state of oneness. Now, to understand these questions, we seek answer through polarising and categorising our experiences, our emotions and our memories into good, bad, happy, sad, right, wrong, positive, negative, warm, cold, up, down, on, off, closed, open, trauma, teachings, lessons, blessings, chaos, clarity, wounds, wisdom. You get the idea. But by the time we're 8 years old, our associations with our experiences, emotions and memories have constructed 85% of our personality, as Dr. Joe calls our personal reality, because now we have 100 billion neurons fired and wired into our brains, creating a lopsided view of the world. In other words, our perception of self, others and the world is imbalanced. This is because from like the macroscopic universe to the micro, everything in 3D reality of humanity happens in duality. But our senses can only experience singularity at any given moment of time, i.e. day, night, sun, moon, positive, negative. Everything's in that dualistic state. But both are simultaneous, but we can only experience one through our sense of human awareness. Therefore, all of our senses are in fact bipolar. Stick with me. By the age of 8, we have a strong perception of how we think the world works, which in turn affects our actions and our outcomes. These are affected as we believe we're powerless to creation due to the previous associations that we're missing something somewhere from somebody in some time. These are known as our voids. But the voids are necessary and give way to our top values. Our childhood voids are our adult values, which we need in order to be looked up to by others. So the ability to live in your top 3 values determines your destiny. So if we seek a different outcome, we need to transcend our associations, our memories and perceptions, which form what is known as your DDT, your deepest dominant thought, which is running all of your subconscious programs right now, and no one talks about it. But in our work, we have our proprietary conscious collapse process, which brings our lopsided associations, memories and perceptions back into homeostasis, which awakens the immortal nature of our soul. However, I would like to now share with you how I came to experience the collapse in my own deepest dominant thought, which led me to creating this, perfecting it, still ongoing process over many years. Because when I was a kid, or a Wayne, as we Scottish call our children, amongst other names, I'll avoid that. But they were there. None of them were on my passport, but I used to get called other names. But in all seriousness, I actually came from a very loving family. I was very lucky with the loving upbringing I had, especially in our rough and ready local area. My mum was an extraordinary woman. She had a very tough upbringing though, single parent household pretty much since she was born. There was also a 10-year gap between her and my Auntie Karen. That was her only sibling. And my Auntie Karen would work 12-hour shifts to supplement my gran working in the factory to support all 3 of them. So in short, my mum grew up feeling very lonely, alone, confused, sad, scared, because at the age of 5, she would come home from school to an empty house and have to do the chores. She'd have to dust, hoover, clean, peel the potatoes, put coal on the fire, walk the dog, which of course had an effect on how she turned up in the world. My dad, on the contrary, young Tam, also an amazing person, had a much more favourable childhood. He was a blue-eyed boy that could do no wrong by my gran, old Hannah Banana, as we called her. So he could charm his way through life. And he was also very close to my papa, who was old Tam. Young Tam was my dad, old Tam was my grandfather. So he had a very stable, loving family unit that my mum didn't have. Now, growing up as a kid, I was very close to my dad. He was my teacher, he was my protector, he was my best friend, he was my hero. But he was a post-war baby boomer. And he worked as a principal, so as you can imagine, was always looking to teach and impart his wisdom on others, and he liked people looking up to him. And since I was just a sponge for learning, I wanted to devour anything he taught me to show him listen, Dad, I'm a good student and I wanted to make him proud of me. Ironically, why I subconsciously became a teacher in my later years. I was exceptionally lucky to have my dad, who was such a wealth of knowledge, to show me how to play football, golf, tennis, badminton, my schoolwork, of course. But as he's a big kid himself, showed me how to have fun and laugh. Music was the big thing that connected us as well. But around the home, he was as handy as a chocolate fireguard. Like my mum, being the house-proud, old-school, no-nonsense Scot woman she is, would often tell him, just get out my way so she could do what needed to do, or get out my kitchen. But that freed my dad up to play and teach with my sister and I. And when I was about 6 or 7 years old, my dad had just bought me a new set of junior golf clubs and a bag of those balls that had the holes in them that you could hit as hard as you want, but they don't actually go anywhere. Anyway, on this day, 3 of my friends, Colin Booth, Stephen Gilroy and Gary Pellegrini, they were in my garden and my dad was showing us how to grip the club, set our hands, shoulders and feet, and how to swing the club to hit the ball. And seeing my dad get every one of us almost instant success had me in like complete awe of him. And as such a young kid, my neocortex, that part of the brain that is just soaking up information and has this insatiable appetite to understand what's going on in the world, it was just lighting up like a Christmas tree. As was my frontal lobe, the master conductor that's trying to navigate and work out what's going on in life. So here I am sitting there watching him, wondering, how can I teach Gary and Stephen just like he's helping Colin? So I listened to him saying, hold on, Colin, until I stand on this side. Mark, Gary, Stephen, you boys too. We never stand behind someone as they're about to hit a shot. That's dangerous. Make sure you're standing in front of them so you can see them and they can see you. Right, Colin. Shake your hands with the club. Slip your little pinky finger in here. Tom thumbs on top of each other. Keep your head down. And when you can imagine your best swing and shot, push it straight back and straight through, big man. Nice and slow. Boom. Colin smashed this thing right up in the air. Perfect. Was absolutely delighted with himself. My dad high-fived him, told him how awesome he was. And Colin's dad passed away when he was 2. He was quite a large boy as well. So as you can imagine, this was a rare time he actually felt he was doing well and getting praise from an older man. But just as the celebrations rang out, the phone went. This is before the mobiles, and my mum asked my dad to run in and answer it as her hands were covered in mixture. She was baking something. And as my dad ran away, he said, have a wee practice, boys. Just remember, don't stand behind anyone. Now, all I could think about as he left was, I'm going to help Gary and Stephen feel just as good as my dad helped Colin feel. So I started to copy his instructions word for word. And just as Stephen was getting ready to go, crack! And I just remember screaming in pain and letting out this huge wail as Colin in front of me swung the club back, smashed me right in the mouth, chipping my front 2 teeth. Now, like most kids, I looked to my parents to confirm that this was worth crying about. And as my dad was coming back out into the garden, he'd seen the whole thing play out. So my dad walks over to me and he takes the club from Colin's grasp, gently lifts my chin up, takes me over to the side and says, you had the right idea, son. But that wasn't Colin's fault. Remember, you need to stand in front of people so you can see them and they can see you. Come beside me, wee man. He then got the boys set up to go again, and within seconds, Stephen and Colin were swinging perfectly. Now, I think you would agree with me that if I said that all that man was doing in that moment was loving his son, that's all he was doing, by the way, loving his boy, keeping him safe. But that wasn't what was happening for me. It's not how I was perceiving the reality. It was very different. Little did I know that my subconscious internal response in that moment would shape everything I'd done in my life, as in this precise moment, my deepest dominant thought was formed. My dad was happy to see me trying to help coach and teach others. And in fact, he could have had a number of different responses. He could have shouted at me. He could have scalped me, as we call it, or smacked me. He could have sent the boys home, stopped us playing. But all he did was take me to a safe place and show me how to do it. But that moment was very, very different for me. I had all this sensory information coming through. I was buzzed in pain as well. The touch from the golf clubs, the touch from them in my face, the pain in my mouth, the taste of blood, the sun in my skin, the smell of a rare summery day in Scotland, the sound of the swoosh of the golf clubs and the connection with the ball. So all of that information, I had to superposition the experience in time and space. And in doing so, I made my dad right and me wrong. My dad intelligent, me stupid. My dad the wise teacher and me the struggling student. It wasn't Colin's fault, it was mine. Now, did my dad make me wrong though? stupid or a struggling student? No, I did that. All he was doing was loving me and getting me to safe. But since I had to position the information from that experience somewhere, as all human sensory experiences are bipolar, as I said, you can't be happy and sad at the same time. I made him right and me wrong. None of it was conscious though. But in doing so, I fractured my perception of myself, of others, and the world, and I immediately made an experience. Attached to that experience was a memory, and attached to that memory was an emotion, which was the disappointment of not being good enough, or not listening to my dad, or not doing it in the correct way. He wasn't trying to make me feel not good enough. I felt that as a result of what I was doing with the information that I was receiving. It was polarising and fracturing my experience. Now, remember this. Anything that gets caught within an emotional experience becomes cyclical. It repeats in our lives. So from that point on, anytime I ever did anything, I would go to my dad looking for his approval and I'd say, Dad, am I doing it right? And he would always have a look, check it over, look back at me and say, close son, but you need to do this, this and this. Or he would use Scottish banter and call me a Philistine if I forgot how to do it. Philistine, I'm the best at this. Because he got off on that intelligence. But this started to build up real pressure for me because I didn't find it funny. And the worst place it could have affected me was compromised, which for me was on the football pitch when I was like 12 to 14 years old. And this is where we really bonded, as I was very good at football. I played pro youth for Glasgow Celtic, so I got the most praise, pride and love from my dad on the football pitch. But with receiving my father's love pinned in the pressure of performance, it got too much for me and I no longer played the game I loved. I performed for my dad to love me. I would be petrified to make a mistake in the pitch, which of course I then done repeatedly. I was scared to look over to the sidelines as I could feel his eyes bearing into me. Eventually I would look over where he would just shake his head, look away, walk a few paces with his back to the game, turn around with his arms folded and just sigh, another head shake. I dreaded the drive home. He would just ignore me down the motorway until we were like 5-10 minutes from our house. And then he would start to dissect the game with all the mistakes I made, asking me, why did you do this? Why did you not do that? He would then shout at me, you were hiding. You didn't want the ball. Now, my dad wears his feelings on his face. So when we got home, I would then hear him and my mum argue over it, where he would say to her, he's got all the skill in the world, but he's got to beat his man 3 times to get past him. He's too slow. He's no pace. That's not good enough. Celtic will not put up with that. Now, even though my mum would fiercely defend me, saying about hormones and I was going through growth spurts and it's only a game of football, I'd checked out already because I could hear all of this from my bedroom. I was cut to the core that my dad, my hero, was so mad at me. He would then walk past me in the house and say nothing other than a sigh and a head shake and a smirk for days, sometimes weeks at a time after my bad game. So to add more pressure, I then took on the subconscious false belief that mum and dad argue when I don't play well at football. And to add even more pressure, my mum then shouted, there's 2 Waynes, 2 children, in this house, and she, my sister, gets dragged all over Ayrshire with not so much as a second thought to watch fucking football, and for this, it's only a game time. Now, you would be within reason to think that this is where my deepest dominant thought was formed, but no, this is formed between the ages of 0 and 8 years old. And even though I then pulled back from my dad in my later teens and my 20s, trying to convince myself that I was a big, strong man now, went to the gym, I don't give a fuck, I don't need him for anything, little Mark within would still ask his dad's opinion and things and get even more distorted sensory information through Tam's age-old answer. You've got the right idea, but do this, this and this. And this happened again and again in my life as I was unconsciously polarising and fracturing every experience I was having beyond the level of consciousness. Now, I would just go forwards and backwards and forwards as little Mark was just trying to get his dad's approval to feel good enough and worthy of love. But all I ever got was the same response over and over again because I was caught in an emotional state from the golf incident with Colin when I was 6 years old. From that moment, I started to build a subconscious equation that nothing I could ever do was going to be good enough for my dad. Now, my dad was not doing that to me. I'm not condoning how he was with the football, but he was not doing that to me at the point of origin. I'd forged a hardwired false belief. Nothing I could ever do was going to be good enough for my dad. Really, it was, I'm only worthy of love if I perform the best, which became my deepest dominant thought and led to a whole host of issues that continued to plague my life all the way throughout my life. So here's how my deepest dominant thought played out in action, because I knew deep down I was born to stand out, but I spent the majority of my life trying to stand in line with everyone else. I was a sheep. I was scared to step into my true power because I'd been bullied terribly as a youngster, mentally and emotionally, for trying actually to do the right thing by my friend. And I went from hero to zero at high school overnight, ironically or not, at the same time period as the football pressure with my father. And as I got older, I vowed I would never let anyone hurt me like that again. And I quickly get lost in a vicious cycle of anger, shame and guilt as my short fuse had me not only fighting with my loved ones, but then started to spill out into the street. I was actually arrested for beating up my first love's ex-boyfriend, and I was charged with severe assault to permanent disfigurement. I was then let out on bail for a year and almost denied the chance to become a school teacher. And despite being a resident DJ in Scotland's biggest nightclub, I'd never actually tried drugs. But 26, after fighting in my hometown with a group of 6 youngsters armed with knives, I went back to my mate's house and I tried a legal high to ironically try and calm me down. But before I knew it, I was then 18 months later, I had been lost in weekly 3-day benders fueled with casual sex, alcohol, ecstasy, cocaine, ketamine and methadone. All this was whilst I was a qualified teacher working in a behavioural school to help children not become the person I was after the 3 o'clock bell on a Friday. Talk about feeling like the ultimate fraud and not being good enough. I was slowly hating myself more and more. And then one day after a drug-fueled argument with my girlfriend, I was led to go on cold turkey but ended up lost in severe depression. Now, being a proud Scotsman who's taught not to cry, I tried to fight it, but spent days crying uncontrollably. I was thrashing around my bedroom, one day unable to even pick my head up from the pillow as I battled suicidal thoughts daily. I had next to no money, so I even used my emergency power card. UK peeps will know what that is. It had eaten the last of my toast and beans. I couldn't even use it for toast because there had no electricity, so it was cold white bread with cold beans. And I was rocking away in a duvet in a freezing cold flat thinking, what the fuck have I done with my life? And then thankfully one day my old school friend Michelle Cairns intuitively thought something was not right with him, and she turned up at my door to check on me. And it was then I was forced to open my heart and lose my ego and confide in another and ask for help for maybe the first time in my life. And from there, things started to get a little bit better, and this is when the universe started to whisper to me, because my old university friend Mikey Brady sent me a Facebook message out of the blue saying he'd a Skype meeting set up with his school recruitment director, and I had a teaching job with my name on it to head 2 campuses as the main PE teacher in Doha, Qatar. And I knew this was my ticket out of the nightmare I was living. So 3 months later, I was in the land of the sand and my new life was underway. I was teaching, I was doing personal training, I was running boat parties, I was DJing in Gordon Ramsay's Maze restaurant, and I even fell in love with and got engaged to a beautiful girl, Stacey, who had the same birthday to me. But the fun and the sun turned stale pretty quickly, because living and working alongside hundreds of teachers in a small but ridiculously rich country quickly began to take its toll. There was lots of freedom restrictions, corruption and slavery, which triggered my anger and outspoken nature. But the horror stories we heard about the police and the government forced me to stay silent and internalise. So I started to suffer from debilitating anxiety. I slept about 2 to 3 hours a night if I was lucky for about 4 months straight. I blamed the culture, the weather, even my childhood asthma, even though I hadn't took an inhaler for 10 years. Everything other than admit my mental health was suffering. But we stayed strong, as Scottish people do. And we finished out our 2-year contract, and then we moved to Perth, Western Australia. I left teaching and I decided to go full-time in my personal training business and found what I thought was my purpose, creating a 6-figure business from scratch within 6 months of being in a country I'd never even visited before. And plans for our July 2015 40 grand dream wedding in Zakynthos were taking shape. My Facebook was filled with beautiful sunset pics every day. Everyone back home was jealous. It looked as though I was living the dream, but the truth was, life was becoming an increasing nightmare. I was miserable, I was stressed with work, and I felt pressured into settling down. I was working 7 days a week, 13, 14-hour days. I was underslept, overstressed. I had no friends and family nearby, and my finances and my mental health were at an all-time low because everything was going into the dream wedding. My anger was reaching the point of irrational uncontrol again, and I felt as though I was ready to pop, and that is what happened. Stacey's mental health triggered my associative memories of my own depression and anxiety, and because I believed I could not survive feeling like that again, nor could I handle Stacey's jealousy or paranoia or walking in eggshells anymore. I decided to call the wedding off with 10, 11 weeks to go. We lost our 40 grand money that we put out, but that's not all. I actually married someone else. As fate would have it, I ended up meeting and falling in love with Samantha just a few weeks later. I was due to marry Stacey on the 13th of July 2015, but as fate would have it, I married Sam on the 11th of August 2015. Yeah, less than a month apart with no crossover. I know it's crazy. There was no cheating. But for the first time, I was falling my heart over my head, or so I thought. We now know this is a trauma bond. But I was driven to make more of a client impact beyond the physical, so my new wife and I rebranded my six-figure PT business into a multiple six-figure health coaching business, and we started helping people heal physically, mentally and emotionally. We quickly secured our own private facility and had an annual turnover of 243k. Life was going great until the day my life stopped. Only 6-7 months into our marriage, March the 5th actually, 2016, I was diagnosed with a rare aggressive cancer where surgeons wanted to remove my lymph nodes, my fascia and part of my rectus abdominis muscle. The exact quote, whilst not even looking at me, was, "I don't care what the MRI says, I'm removing your fascia." Aye, okay mate, my strong inner Scotsman said. The biopsy that we had, the plastic surgeon wanted to cut me from just below my sternum all the way around just below my navel. I wasn't scared, ironically here. I felt confused. How the hell could this happen to me? I mean, I was a personal trainer, holistic health coach, for God's sake. I ate healthy, kept myself in shape. I was lean, I was muscular, I was about 90 kilograms, about 8 to 10% body fat year round. I stayed active in sports like boxing and football, just never made sense. More so, I was wondering, how the hell did I tell, this was actually my first thought, how did I tell my wife and my mum that her firstborn has cancer while I'm the other side of the world? I started to feel very guilty about how I was going to cause so much pain and emotional stress for my family. I was completely numb. Then I thought, maybe this is karma. Maybe because of calling things off with Stacey, or for all my years of anger and violence and being disrespectful by sleeping with lots of women. The truth was, my internal dialogue and repressed emotions had finally caught up in me and manifested physically in a desperate bid to get my attention and wake my ass up. But unfortunately, this became too much pressure for our young marriage, and my wife left me, where we're now divorced. Engaged again, that's a separate story. I'll get to that. So back then, stay with me, because I was sick, I was alone, and I was left running a company that was founded with who I thought was my soulmate, but no longer loved me or could be with me. So of course I was scared, I was petrified, but in fact, deep down, like deep down, I actually knew this was the universe conspiring for me and not against me. I know that sounds weird, but that's what was going on. And I knew I wasn't going to stop this time until I had found the cause and what was this actually trying to teach me. I knew I had to stop allowing myself to wallow in depression and self-pity. I had to start connecting to my soul's deepest purpose beyond the physical stuff and the mental rent that I was paying overtime in. So immediately I sought help from some of the world's greatest mentors and healers, and I delved into quantum mechanics, neuroscience, metaphysics and natural therapies to heal my cancer. I realised everything that was happening in my personal and business life was a result of my deepest dominant thought. It had been buried for 25 years. And despite all the previous attempts to get my attention over the years and go within to balance this false perspective, I'd been ignorant to the truth of everything. Let me sidetrack a minute, I'll explain in more detail, because my first mentor, he sat me down and said, "Mark, yes, your life is a mess, but you've created it. And if you can create that, you can create anything. Do you truly know though why you're destroying your life and why you don't feel good enough?" I says, "No, I don't." He says, "Mark, you have an infatuation with your dad. When I ask you, what does mum mean to you, what does dad, you put them away up here." I said, what are you talking about? He says, "Well, tell me about your dad again." And I says, "Well, he's an amazing man. My dad's so courageous. He lost his principal position at school and then broke his back working his way back up the teacher ladder to be principal again, so that my mum, my sister and I would never go without. He taught me what it is never to give up, to do whatever it takes, as he tells me, and to work hard for what you believe in, no matter how times you fail or what hardship you encounter. I owe so much to him, I couldn't get through life with him." And he said, "That's it, that's exactly your problem." And I went, "I'm not getting it. What is?" And he says, you have your father on a pedestal. And anytime you put anyone on a pedestal, you simultaneously put yourself in a pit so that you can look up to them. You're infatuated with your dad publicly, but privately you're resenting him. I mean, okay, so what does that mean? He said, how are you and your dad? I said, well, to be honest, I hardly speak to him, but when I do, it's for him to answer the phone, pass it on to my mum back home, as we don't have much to speak about. And to be honest, now I think about it, we never really have since I was 15 and Celtic released me. I definitely can't talk to him about how I'm feeling right now. He's severely overweight. In fact, he always has been. He's on blood pressure tablets after taking a stroke. And to be honest, I've worried about his health my whole life, so I don't want to stress him out and affect his blood pressure even more. He said, you have to balance this perception you have of your dad with something greater than this, because your dad didn't become overweight so you could sabotage your own health with cancer, Lyme's disease and deep depression. I went, okay, can you give me an example of what you mean? He says, okay, tell me about your mum and your dad. I says, well, my mum and dad are like two kids, even in their 60s. They laugh, they joke, they fight, they play fight, they argue, they smile, they dance, they wind each other up, they go away on little trips together. They're kind of like a romantic version of Punch and Judy, and everyone comments about how much love they have for one another, especially my dad's way with words for her. That's what everyone sees, to be honest, though. That's not really the full picture. It's not really what it was like for me growing up, at least not all the time. He said, okay, how do you get on in relationships, Matt? I said, I'll get into a relationship, I'll let someone in, I'll let them in closer, a little bit closer again, and then just when I feel kind of infatuated with them, I'll push them away and I'll close them out. I can't stand to be near them all of a sudden. Their hair, their face, their voice, their body shape, anything and everything just starts to irritate me. I'll then be single a bit, usually briefly though. I'll find someone else before realising that I've kind of just probably bumped into a remixed version of the same girl I've just left, no matter what colour, race, part of the world they're from. Deep question. He said, Matt, you've got your dad's marriage up on a pedestal, and every time you have an opportunity to be healthier, happier than your father's relationship, you subconsciously sabotage it because you don't want to hurt him. You never want to outdo him because you never want him to feel less than, especially after you've seen him losing his job. I sat back and I thought, wow, that's exactly what I'm doing. It started to go in a little bit. I said, can you give me another example? He says, how do you do in business? I says, my friends have always said that I could sell sand to the Arabs or snow to an Eskimo. And to be honest, growing up, I never had a lot of money, but I always get by with hard work. I had 3 jobs by the time I was 14. And as I got older, I would be like my dad, and I would spend what I have looking after others and living by that, fuck it, I don't want to be the richest guy in the graveyard mantra. And as I got older again, I got into working for myself. I developed the systems to break the trading time for money burnout. I'd work hard normally, and this is where I would start to earn real money. But then when I was ready to scale my $250,000 health coach business to 7 figures, all of a sudden I can't stand the thought of working with some of my clients. I hated the drive there. I resented getting up at that time in the morning. Couldn't stand the smell of the place, even the sight of my coaches. I grudged switching on the lights of the premises. I couldn't wait for the session of days to be over to get the hell out of there and be as far away from it as possible. But of course, that's not what anyone else sees. I actually see my money, the big part. That's where I sabotage my money all the time. I feel like calling off my 40 grand wedding with 11 weeks to go, knowing I was going to lose it all, paying 10 grand for my now divorced wife's visa residency, liabilities in business. Every PD guru that's out there, you name it, I found a way to never really get ahead. 6 months later, I'll have to start all over again because every bit of money I've got, I've just spent it. He said that's because you have your father's success up here on the pedestal, Mark, and every time you feel you're going to be more successful than your father, you subconsciously sabotage because you don't want to outdo him, you don't want him to feel inferior, he means too much to you, and you would never hurt him like that. That's the glass ceiling that you have, but you need to bust through this infatuation because that's what you show other people, but there's a private resentment. And I says, well, what the fuck do I do about this? Because it's killing me. It's literally strangling my love and relationships and success, eats away at it, and I'm over it. And he says, okay, I want you to come back here to the office on Friday night. I'm going to take you through a process that's going to shift this completely. I do as I'm told. I come back. And at this stage in my life, I'd hardly said 2 words to my dad in over 6 months because I was ashamed at just how much I'd sabotaged everything in my life. So I got to the office about 7:30 in the evening. It was dark, it was cold, pouring with rain. I go inside, he sits me down and he asks me a short series of questions, but they were deep. I remember starting to get really pissed off with it. But before he starts, he takes me back to being hit with a golf club in the garden. And he showed me how I first put my dad on the pedestal and me in the pit. And he showed me how it was a continual reenactment in every situation in my life since. And he showed me how I was running around looking for external acceptance. About 10 o'clock, I started to get really frustrated now because I'm sitting here with the pen going, I'm not fucking getting it. It's not working. I don't understand it. I'm never going to get this. He then gave me a breathing technique to do, and he just kept repeating the question, saying, don't stop, it's there, keep looking. Now, I have experienced some of the most profound things that's happened in my lifetime. Like I've had dinner with Dr. John DeMartini. I've sank tequila in Puerto Vallarta with Dr. Joe Dispenza, as he told me, beautiful souls like yours are worth saving. I've had walking alpha meditations where I've met my miscarried daughter, holding her in my arms with my eyes open. But without a doubt, the most profound moment in my life was when I was 32 years old in Balcata, Perth, Western Australia, with my first master. And the only way I can describe it, it was as if my life just came together and went whoosh. In a split second, I just started shaking all over my body, tears running down my face as I heard this piece of music, and then just starting to feel relief in the cry. And I started to laugh simultaneously. I felt I was hyperventilating, and I was trying to verbalise what I was feeling. And I was crying so much, not because I was sad or was hurting, it was just absolute gratitude that I was finally free. I realised in that moment that everything I had perceived my dad had never given me, he had. It just made me go and get it for myself. The self-love I was seeking, the thing that he couldn't provide, he gave me the tools to go and get it for myself. And I just felt so humble because I just felt, my God, every breath this man has taken was about me. And for the first time in my life, as if my whole life had just came together in a split second and made sense. As if literally God had put hands on my shoulders, let me come into the room of absolute clarity and knowing for a split second that it was timeless, but it was over like that. It's hard to articulate. I remember it took me about an hour to get myself together because I just couldn't stop smiling with a tsunami of tears running down my face. I felt absolutely free and completely at peace. And as I looked at him, the only words that could come out of my mouth were, thank you. Thank you. I remember pulling myself together, leaving his offices. I got in my car around midnight and I started calling back home to Scotland. It was 8 hours behind Perth, Australia, to speak to my dad. And this is when the magic really started because, as usual, my dad answered, hello. And upon knowing it was me, instead of immediately going and passing the phone to my mum, he stopped and he said, son, how are you doing? We miss you. I hope you're doing okay. And I just want you to know that we are so, so proud of you. I had to immediately pull into the side of the road and try and catch my breath as the tears once again started streaming down my face. My dad, being the proud Scotsman, stoic and often emotionless, had just told me for the first time in my life he was proud of me. Why? Because I was now proud of myself. And I was able to receive his words with the love that was always intended and given. But the real passing of the torch came in the following 60 to 8 minutes when he said nothing, which is rare for a teacher to become the student, but he just sat in silence until I told everything that I had just experienced. And when I finished, he asked me, if you don't mind me, son, how much was this thing that you just went on? And he says, in fact, it doesn't matter. You could have paid 100 times the price and got great value by the sound of it. I just wish I was there to experience it with you. And I replied, try 1,000,000 times and then some. I says, thanks, Dad, I love you. I says, but this was an experience I had to see for myself. He just laughed and he went, you're absolutely right, son. Savour it for you. You deserve it. You better get into your bed. Just know that whatever you need, consider it done. I've always got you, but you've got it all yourself. And at this point, I had to open the car door and get some fresh air. I kind of stumbled backwards towards the bonnet of the car to just kind of hold me up because my knees were knocking. And the only way I can describe it was I was in a complete state of grace and wholeness. I was the car. I was the ground. I was the rain. There was nothing missing because I realised there never really was. And here's the real miracle. As I continued to expand my consciousness and open my heart, It wasn't long before I had another profound epiphany around my life purpose, and I committed myself to building a legacy business that served people at the highest level, something that would also afford my family financial freedom without sacrificing my relationships or health, how to have love and success at the same time. So as I began applying the wisdom of my mentors and the highest self, nothing could have prepared me for what happened next, because I was cancer free in 12 weeks. After refusing the surgery from the plastic surgeon, they couldn't find any cancer in my body. Now, let me be very clear. I'm not making any radical claims here. But for me, my truth was, as soon as I shifted my deepest dominant thought and I connected to my soul's core calling, my cancer started going into remission. It was almost like I had cleansed my physical and emotional being of toxins. The tumour was successfully removed without incident. It was just, all of it was gone because I was so present. And as I reflected, the truth slowly dawned on me, like my years of negative thinking, my guilt, my shame, my fear, my resentment, my anger, my frustration, my self-loathing, my inauthenticity, my paranoid and controlled outlook in life, my unworthiness had all caught up with me. But all the tragedies now made sense. I mean, how the hell could I ever be happily ever after if my deepest dominant thought was I was a disappointment and I was unworthy of love and life? Now, I've spent the last 9 to 10 years trying to describe that moment I had with my first mentor, and I can never fully articulate into words, as it's something that's completely experiential, and it's a profound freedom and peace that everyone in this life, everyone on this planet should experience. I can talk around the moment, but I can't really do the moment itself justice. What I can tell you though, is that it awaits you, it awaits every human being. This moment awaits every human being on the planet, and it was in those moments of that evening that everything I do in my career and within my vision and core calling was birthed in that night of core discovery. And it awaits you too. Every day as I shower and I look down at the scar, I'm reminded of why I'm alive and how grateful I am for the opportunity to help people, which is why I dedicate my life to helping other people shift their deepest dominant thought and core wound so they can finally have the equal love and success that their soul craves. Now, I hope my story gives you a little insight of how you too can break free from the chains of the past when we locate and shift your deepest dominant thought. I only share my experience with you to give you some sort of confidence that it is possible. No matter what you've been through, all of us have parts of ourselves that we can't see. And if there's anything in this that resonates from any of the specific traumatic moments, to borrowing my confidence in you, that if I can do this, so can you. And if it resonates anything at all, just know I've spent the last 10 years helping other people do the exact same thing. And just in the description below this video is an opportunity to book in a free call with me. There's a couple of questions just so I have more of an idea. This isn't talk therapy. I spent years doing that shit. And again, sorry, I take that back. I say that with love and respect, because anyone that wakes up in the morning trying to help another human being has my vote. But the science has shown us otherwise. The body keeps the score. We can't just keep talking about the problem. It's not an information problem. If that was the case, we'd just go on Google. The issues are in the tissues. We need to know the exact formula, how to get this up, how to superposition, and how to move this up and out. And I've created my own version of this. I've stood on the shoulders of giants because I finally found worthy of it. I didn't need to reinvent the wheel anymore, and neither do you. So if you would like some support, please click the link below and allow us to come and help you.